Well, thanks guys for coming. We're really glad you're all here. As you guys know, fall is just around the corner. So we've got Andy in the studio. He's going to show us all how to make some great pumpkins with our FolkArt Pure Pigment line. We're really excited about these. We think they look great, and we're excited to see what you guys come up with today. So be sure to share with us after you've finished crafting. So I think with that, I'm just going to turn it over to Andy.
Okay, thank you very much, Stephen. I appreciate that. And we are indeed going to paint some pumpkins. So I have here in front of me, this is our pumpkin, and I painted this on a great surface that I picked up at Michael's. It is a 10 by 10 gray washed weathered plaque. So it's got nice little sides to it, and it was a great surface to decorate. And so I did not have to do any prep work to this. I used it just like it came from the store. And if you printed out our downloadable template, you can transfer that to your surface using white transfer paper, or you could just quickly sketch a little pumpkin on that's more to the right-hand side of the plaque. And you could just do that with some chalk if you wanted to. And as Stephen mentioned, I am using the FolkArt Pure Artist Pigments today. So there was a link to a downloadable template right underneath the supply list on the Michaels website. So we're going to start today by putting out some FolkArt Pure Artist Pigments Pure Orange on the palette. And this painting is a complementary color scheme. So we have blue and orange as our primary complements, and that creates a lot of visual tension in our painting and makes it a little bit more dramatic to look at. So what I'm going to do is I'm using a 3/4 inch flat brush. It's dry and I am not putting it in water. If you are tempted to use a lot of water or put your brush in water, here is a little tip for you. Take a paper towel and simply lay it over your water container, and that way you will not be tempted to put your brush in water. I like to hold my brush by putting the tip of the handle in the palm of my hand and then grasping the brush. So we're going to load our brush with the FolkArt Pure Orange, and I'm going to begin to paint in my pumpkin shape. And don't worry about it at the bottom. Just let that fade away. We're only concerned about getting some pure orange in the top 3/4 of the pumpkin. Now, tap and pat with your brush to make sure that you can get the paint down into the texture of the plaque. I'm not worrying about the big grooves that are through the pumpkin, but any of just the wood texture, you want to work some of that paint down into it. And we're just going to paint the whole pumpkin with pure orange. And it's probably best just to go straight across so that the paint fills in all of those wonderful ridges. And we're going to be using that to our advantage as we start to highlight our pumpkin. Let your surface do a lot of the work for you. Don't try to fight what you're painting on. If it's heavily textured, then let that be part of the painting. And Stephen, if anybody has any questions, just go ahead and fire them away.
Okay, we'll do.
We'll do our best to get them answered for people. And I'm sure that somewhere along the way, someone's going to type in and tell me to slow down. And I can tell you to save your keystrokes because we are going to try to finish this pumpkin in just about an hour. So we have to work at a brisk pace. So we can't slow down, but I'm going to try not to paint so fast that you can't keep up with me. So I understand that painting along in a class like this is a bit of a challenge. So I try to give you a little bit of time to catch up with me when I can. And so I'm just filling this in. And again, we're just letting the paint trail off at the bottom of our pumpkin. So go ahead and work on this, and I'll give you a couple of minutes to get caught up to this point. and I'm going to then dry my pumpkin. So as you are painting, Stephen's going to be watching, and he's going to let me know when people are starting to painting. So I'm just going to take my heat tool and I'm going to dry the paint on here. Okay, so that's dry enough. I'm still going to give you another minute to get that pure orange on your pumpkin. And do note that I just laid my brush down. I didn't put it in the water. No need for that at this time.
See people working away, Andy.
Very good. They have to work away or they'll get nothing done. Somebody's asking why I use the Pure Artist pigments. They're just a great paint. I love them. They are super thick in body and they give me that kind of sticky feel that I really like when I'm blending with acrylics. And they have an open time that allows me to blend and work with the paint very easily. So got this dry, and I know people are still putting that first coat of orange on, but I'm going to go ahead and quickly just put a second coat of orange on just to get a little bit better coverage. And it's still not going to be perfect, but it's going to give a little bit more coverage to the pumpkin. So this is just a quick second coat, and it should go on much, much faster than the first coat because you spent more time putting that first coat on, and this coat's not really going to take that much to get some coverage going. And then we're going to dry this. And I'm glad that we're having time to paint some of these pumpkins ahead of actual Halloween, so you can get this stuff done before your little ghosts and goblins are about. So what we've done so far is put on 2 quick coats of pure orange on our pumpkin, letting the pumpkin fade out at the bottom. So I'll give you another minute or so to get the pure orange on your pumpkin before we move on to developing some shading on our pumpkin.
Okay, Andy, I've got a question for you.
Okay, Stephen?
Okay, Sandy says that she's a little confused about the direction of the light in the picture. It looks like it's coming from the left side, but the white is back kind of behind it. Could you speak on that a little bit?
What we actually have is our pumpkin is highlighted on the left edge, and this background really isn't anything except some background color. So I did put a little bit more light color over here on the left-hand side, which is different than if this were set up as a still life, where your light would be coming in, it would strike the pumpkin, and then it would actually be lighter on the side where the light continues on and hits the background. So since I have had very little background over there, I just put my light over here. So this is not set up in a true still life fashion. This is just a decorative design, and it doesn't really matter where your highlights are. This is painted for the effect of some bright highlights on our pumpkin and then some interest in our background.
Okay, thank you. I hope that helps, Sandy. And Kathy also, she saw you use your heat gun, and she says that doesn't look like a hair dryer. Is it a heat gun that you'd remove for painting? And Kathy, we love to talk about Andy's heat gun. So go ahead, Andy.
Yes, everybody laughs at my heat gun. I don't own a hair dryer, so I invested in a heat gun. And when I was shopping on America's favorite online retailer, I looked at the heat guns, and of course, this one had, a couple of heat settings, one which was just purgatory and the other was Hades itself. And so I'm like, okay, then let's get this giant heat gun that puts out more heat than you would ever need. And so I overbought my industrial heat gun. But Michael sells one that I listed in the supply list. It's a great heat tool that's great for drying paint. Mine will blister and scorch your surface and can do some damage to it. The one that Michael sells is much more appropriate for most people's day-to-day use. So I do recommend the Art Minds heat gun, which you can get at Michael's. All right, so.
Oh, Andy, sorry, one more question for you real quick.
Perfect, go ahead.
If somebody didn't have this surface right in front of them, what surfaces would you suggest maybe that they could paint on with Pure?
They could paint on any kind of surface that they want to. They could use one of the burlap canvases that you can find in retail stores. I happen to really like this gray washed, very rough barnwood, but you could paint a canvas any color, like brownish gray that you wanted, and do this design on that. So any kind of surface that you want, you can use. I just happened to find this one in the store and really liked it.
Awesome. Thanks, Andy.
Okay, so the next color that I'm going to put on my palette is going to be red light. So I'm going to put out a little bit of red light. And I'm also going to put out, I don't know why I left this off the supply list, but any dark brown color that you have, you can certainly use. It does not matter, just a dark brown color is going to be great. So my apologies for that. The absent-minded artist just doesn't know why I didn't put a little brown on the supply list. But so this could be burnt umber or coffee bean or in any kind of dark brown. So I'm going to mix a little bit of pure orange, a little bit of red light, and then just a small amount of brown. This just making a darkish color. Again, Stephen's going to be typing these names in. So he's going to type in pure orange, red light, dark brown. So I've just made a little bit of a shading color here, and I'm going to brush some of this up from the bottom and just create a little bit of a section. And I'm going to do it again, creating a bit of a section there. And I could do one over here that's not going to be that important, but we'll give a little bit of some shading over there. And then let me show you how much paint is on my brush. I have about that much paint. So there isn't very much at all. And I'm just scrubbing this on a little bit down here at the bottom, which is really taking 90% of the paint off my brush. So pick up a little bit, and then I'm brushing some of this from where I made that little line out to the right side of the pumpkin. So you can see that we're developing a little bit of a shadow on this side. Pick up a little bit more of this color, and we'll do the same thing starting at the bottom, and we're just patting this on, letting some of that dark color stretch out over to the right. This is super quick way to get a little bit of shading on it. I'm just dabbing a little bit over here. All right, so I'm going to let you take a few minutes and put some shading on your pumpkin. So again, the shading was pure orange, plus a little red light, plus a little dark brown. And I just brush mixed a very small puddle of this and brushed it on kind of at the bottom. You could see that there's not much paint there. And then we carried a little bit of a line up, a little bit of a line up, a little bit of a line up, and then just kind of moved some of this color to the right on this side of the pumpkin and over to the left on this side of the pumpkin.
Andy, do you think you could hold your what you've just done up a little bit just so we can see the difference in how you've spread it out?
I think that's pretty good for you all to get a good idea about it.
Awesome.
So,
thanks, Andy.
Good look at that. And then I'm going to put it back down. And we're just going to leave that be for a moment. And I'm going to wipe my brush on my shop towel. So I want to show you how I do that. I like the blue shop towels better than just regular paper towels for painting. So I put my brush down, I fold my shop towel over it, and then using my index finger and thumb, I pinch and then I pull my brush out. So what I'm doing is really taking the excess paint out of the brush, and then I'm grooming the brush back into a very nice shape. So it's formed a nice shape again, and it has a nice chisel edge. So that does two things, gets rid of excess paint and grooms the brush all at the same time. Now, I'm going to put out some yellow light on my palette. And I'm
Andy,
not,
Judith wants to know, how do you get excuse me, sorry, let me read this one more time. How do you get your pumpkin sections to already look so rounded? I guess she means like each individual sort of divot.
okay, well, part of it has to do with the curvature of, this is the outside shape of the pumpkin. So the next one just kind of follows that same curve and then follows. You've got to make sure to follow the curve of the outside shape of your pumpkin. And then it's darker on one side than the other. Then here's my base coat color. So it's darker on one side and lighter. So this dark to light gives you that kind of contrast. So I think that's how I do it. I will say, if you go back and watch the replay, they'll have it up on the Michael's website and YouTube channel. So you can watch it again in 24 hours. Maybe just watching it a second time will really kind of drive home how I get the sections to look rounded like that. But I didn't do anything that was, there was no special painting technique or anything that was very unusual about that. And I think part of it is that we're moving pretty quickly and it just looks maybe a bit more magical than it actually is. All right, so we're going to start to build up some lighter areas on our pumpkin. So once again, hold your flat brush, put the tip of the handle in the palm of your hand and then grasp the brush. I really want you to be in the habit of holding the brush as far back on the handle as you can. So we're going to pick up some pure orange, and we're just making a little puddle of that here on our palette. And I'm going to pick up some pure, this is yellow light, and I'm going to brush mix some yellow light into my pure orange, making a light orange color. You want this color to be the color you think of as a beautiful orange ready to be juiced for breakfast. So this is a little bit too crazy intense orange, and that's going to be, of course, too yellow, but you want something that looks like a beautiful color orange. All right, so I don't have much paint on my brush. And what I'm going to do is start over here on the left side of my pumpkin, the lightest side of my pumpkin. And I'm going to put some of this yellow color right at the outside edge. And I'm tapping on one corner of the brush, and then I'll move it and I'll tap it on the other corner. Let's look here on the palette, and I am going to tap and push this color down and then do it the other direction. So I get something that kind of looks like that. All right, so it's not one single stroke direction that's repeated over and over. It is corner of the brush, flat of the brush, come back with the opposite corner and just kind of move around a little bit. And you should, using a light touch, be out of paint before you get to the edge of your section there. All right, so we're going to do the same thing again. We are going to start on the left side of this section, and we will put our brush down, tap, 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 and just use the opposite corners of our brush as we skim this paint across the center section of our pumpkin, just spreading out that small amount of orange.
So Andy, does holding your brush the way that you do, does that help it spread more? I mean, what's the benefit?
The benefit is the fact that you cannot have such tight control over your brush. So your pumpkin will have a bit more of a spontaneous impressionistic look. There is an actual word that's called painterly, and that's what we're looking for, is a very painterly effect, so that this looks like it was casually and relaxed painting versus something that has a very academic or rigid style of rendering. So that's why we do this, is so that you have less control over your brush than you would normally have. Now I'm turning my pumpkin so that the lightest edge on the dark side of my pumpkin is away from me. And I'm just going to put a little bit of this light orange at the outside edge, and I'm just skimming this color on. I did not put very much on that outside edge. Let's come in for a tight close-up on that. So you can see there's not much paint on there. And I think that I am probably using less paint than you all think I am. There's not much paint on my brush, so that when I skim this color on, I can still see lots of the shading color and the other color underneath. All right, this is really collecting on the ridges of the textured surface of this little board, this little plaque. All right, so I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to do that, just to get the feel for what we're doing. We don't have a ton of paint on our brush, and we're just doing this kind of corner to corner, very relaxed application of paint. We're not looking for a beautifully refined and highly blended pumpkin. As you can see from this pumpkin, there's nothing that is super refined or finely blended on it. I think sometimes you all look at a painting, and I'm just going to talk about the paintings that I've done. Sometimes you'll look at a painting I've done and you'll think, oh, that's so beautiful. It looks so this or so that. And it's really not as refined as I think some of you think my paintings are. They are quite loose and quite casual. All right, so we're letting this dry. There's a little bit that's coming off on my hand, but not very much because I didn't put much on. So I'm not necessarily going to dry this between every step. So are they still working away, Stephen?
They are.
Okay, well, we'll give them another minute to work on this.
All righty.
And I know it seems like I am just pushing you through this. And we need to get this done in what my favorite quote is, just about an hour. So, when you really think about it, you're doing an awful lot of painting in just an hour. And if you need to stop and just, take a moment, catch your breath, and paint this with the replay, I understand 100%.
Absolutely.
Trying to get it done in about an hour is an awful lot of work for anyone to do. Okay, so and I still have not used any water. You can still see that my shop towel is still on top of my water basin where it will remain. All right, I'm going to just fold my paper towel or my shop towel over my brush, pinch and wipe the excess paint out. And I'm going to take some of that orangey color that we just used, and I'm going to add a little bit more yellow light. So we're stair-stepping up in value. We're getting a little bit lighter, but it's still just a mixture of pure orange and yellow light. And here's what I need you to do for me. When you make this color, I need you to check it. All right, so here's what I mean by check it. I'm going to put a little dab down, and I want you to look at that little dab. That little dab is brighter than the color underneath it. It's not so bright that you instantly stare at it and go, oh my gosh, look at that bright yellow highlight on there. We're not there yet. So I've got a nice orange that's a little bit lighter than what I had before, and that's exactly what I want. So I'm putting this on, and I'm covering a little less area. Does that make sense to everyone? Lighter color, less coverage, or less coverage area. All right, so we're just putting this on again, and watch how quickly I'm doing it. I'm not fussing over every little brush mark that I put on here, because some of you are familiar with our expression, and I'll share it with everyone so that no one feels left out. And it goes like this. You get what you get and you don't pitch a fit. So as you're putting this on, some of it's going to be great every time, some of it's going to be okay, and some of it's going to be not so great. So you get what you get and you don't pitch a fit, because in the overall scheme of life, this one little painting is nothing to worry about. I don't want you getting all upset about what you're painting. It's not worth it. We're putting some paint on a piece of wood and we're having fun and enjoying it. And that's what's important. The end result is much less important than having fun while you're enjoying your time spent painting. This is, it's kind of therapy for some. It's what some people call self-care. It's some me time. It's a very therapeutic hobby to have. But if your therapeutic hobby is causing your anxiety to flare up, then we're kind of defeating the purpose. All right, so here is our second layer of orange highlighting on our pumpkin. So again, this was pure orange plus yellow light plus a little more yellow light. That's where we are right now. Okay, so I'm going to give you another full minute to do that. And once you grasp this idea of stepping up in value and covering just a little less real estate every time, this will really become a very Zen-like way to paint. And you can do this technique with any subject matter you want to. If I had a couple of apples sketched on here, I could start with my red and go from red to red orange to a little yellowy orange to a lighter highlight, just like that, and build up the highlights on an apple. If I had an eggplant, I could start with my dark purple and incrementally add white to that and build up the highlights on a beautiful eggplant if you wanted to do that. So again, subject matter doesn't matter. Color of any subject doesn't matter. It's increasing the value, lightening the value, and covering a bit smaller area each time. All right, so let's wipe our brush off again, just taking that excess paint off of the brush. And again, no water, but we are going back to our yellow light, and I'm adding more yellow light to this puddle of paint here on my palette where I've been working. So I can see the value progression right here on my palette. All right, so we're going to start where we started before, over here on the light left side of our pumpkin. Put this color down, just let some of it tickle out using the opposite corners of the brush. And we're doing the same thing on the center section, spreading a little bit of that out, letting it fade away. Tickle, tickle with the corners of the brush. And I might put a little bit over here, but I am not spending much time there. You saw how quickly I did that. So spend more time over here. I almost spent no time whatsoever over there. And I'll give you another minute to do this.
So Andy, you just touched on that a minute ago, that we don't need any water, but there might be some people out there who don't know why we don't wash off the brushes for these.
Okay, it's more the instructor's aversion to water than it is anything to do with any of you who are taking the class. I don't really like to use a lot of water when I paint with acrylics, unless I need to thin my paint down for a specific technique. What we're doing now is very much like a dry brush technique. And for a dry brush technique, we absolutely don't need any water. Water is going to change the consistency of your paint. It's also going to make the paint wetter, if that makes any sense. It's going to take longer for it to dry. And it's also going to make your paint more transparent and more likely to lift up. So I just cover up my water and stay out of it until I tell you to put your brush in water, which I have not done yet. All right, So let's do one more thing before we put more paint out on our palette. So I'm going to wipe my brush again on the shop towel, taking the excess color off. And now I'm going to pick up just the yellow light. And as I move away, you can see that I've gone from pure orange and I've started adding yellow light. I've added more yellow light, and here it is just yellow light by itself. But I've got my value progression here so that I can see where I'm coming from. All right, so this is what we undercoated with, and now this is where we're highlighting. So you can see your whole pumpkin right here on your palette. You work with acrylics more on your palette than you actually do on the surface that you are decorating. All right, I'm going to take just a little of this excess paint off on my shop towel, and I'm going to come over here onto my pumpkin, over here on the left section, just tapping and tickling a little bit of this yellow on, doing more here in this brighter main section of the pumpkin. I might need to pick up a little bit more for this center here. Just getting that a little bit brighter there. And I'm not even going to put any on the other side. So I'll give you half a minute to put the yellow light highlight on. And so everybody seems to be following along, Stephen?
I think so.
Okay. I want to make sure that I get all the questions answered and people understand the technique is much more important. Yes, I use these brushes with most of my painting. I want people to understand how I do a painting. So it's more like, teach a man to fish and you fed him for life. You give a man a fish, you fed him for one meal. So I'm here to feed you for life. All right. So if you have done this up to this point, let's take our heat tool or hair dryer and just give this a little chance. We want this to dry a little bit so we are not messing up our painting. So just a very quick little dry there. Okay, that's plenty dry. So now I'm going to take some yellow light on my brush that I've not put in water since we started. And now I'm going to add a little bit of titanium white to my yellow light. And we're just going to brush mix that in. So we've made a nice light yellow color. And I'm going to tap my brush on my shop towel just to take the excess paint off of my brush. And we will come to our pumpkin. I'm going to start here in the main bright center of my pumpkin, and I'm going to tap that brush down right at the edge there, and then just tickle that over a little bit. And you can see how vivid that highlight is just because we've added a little white to our yellow. So tap, 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 pat, pat, pat. And here we go. We're going to put a little bit over here on this section. Tap, 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 pat, pat, pat. Just letting that color trail out. All right, so let me show you just how neat and tidy that is when you look at it up close. It's very, very, very casual. All right, so I'll give you 30 seconds to do that. Y'all are doing a great job because I'm not seeing any complaints in the comments, which I love. Usually everybody's just typing at me to slow down. All right, so we're going to do one more thing. I'm going to wipe the excess paint off of my brush on the shop towel. I'm going to pick up a little more titanium white and mix it in out here at the edge of my puddle. So you see I've created a great value scale right here. So I'm going to take this really light color and I'm going to put a little bit of a highlight on my pumpkin. Just tap, tap, tap that on, and then tickle the edge just a little bit so it's not a blob. And I'll do the same thing over there. And then I'll show you what my bright highlight on my pumpkin looks like. So just tap, 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 and just tickle the edge a little bit And that is our highlighted pumpkin. So I'm going to give everybody another minute to get that done and kind of catch up a little bit. I don't want you to feel like we are just running a sprint here. This is a marathon. We've got, miles to go. And I'm just really, really wiping the excess paint out of my brush. Not putting it in water, but thoroughly wiping the paint off on my shop towel. Still going to give you just a little more time to catch up. And if people are just sitting there, Stephen, let me know.
No, I see busy hands.
Okay. I figured there would be busy hands no matter how much time I give them. But I just want people to keep working, but not to feel, like the sword of Damocles is over their head. This is fun painting. So giving them just a little bit more time. Because this is a super easy way to paint a pumpkin. And it's a very, very painterly, very loose way of working.
I see a lot of comments that there are people who think that it already looks great and we're halfway done. So,
Oh, good. We're just a little bit more than halfway done. And actually, we're probably just a little less than halfway done with our painting.
Okay.
Right. So,
Andy, one question real quick. Sorry. Is it better to leave the cracks dry on the wood? You wouldn't like fill them in or anything?
oh, heavens no. I mean, look at what we've got. I have not tried to fill in anything on there. We are using this texture to our advantage. Just leave the cracks there. They're part of the charm of the painting.
Awesome.
Okay, so now what we're going to do is take some red light on our brush, nothing else. All right, this is going to take a little bravery on your part. So not at the center of my pumpkin, but just a little bit to the right. I'm going to dab on some very strong red light. All right, let me show you what that looks like. That's a lot of red light put on there. But grab that brush, grab that red light, and make that pumpkin blush. So I'll give you a moment to gather your courage to do that, and then just put it on. There is still some of the gaps in the wood showing, so it's not solidly covered, but there are some spaces where I've got a little bit more paint on there, and it's perfectly fine. It's a variety of coverage of that, and it's just red light by itself, full strength, nothing held back. Again, making that pumpkin blush. So while you work up the courage to that, I'm going to give you a full minute to work up the courage to get that red light on there, and then we will completely shift gears. So if you like what we're doing today and you want a lot more of this, I encourage you to join the Let's Paint with Plaid Facebook group if you're not already a part of that group. I teach live in the Facebook group every Tuesday and Thursday at noon Eastern time. So, oh, Mary Lou, we're not done. Just put it on there and let's go. Every now and then I do get to see one of your comments. But the red on there, it's okay. If you don't love it on this one, you can leave it out on the next one you paint, but just go with it on this one for me. All right, so the Let's Paint with Plaid Facebook group is a lot of fun. And as I said, I usually teach there every Tuesday and Thursday at noon Eastern time. And the palette that I'm working on is a disposable wax-coated palette. You can find them. Michael's has them. When you're done, you just tear this sheet of wax paper away and you've cleaned up all of your mess. No fuss, no muss, no bother. It is better than wax paper. It's better than freezer paper. You've got a lot more room to work than you have on a styrofoam plate. I love and highly recommend a wax coated palette.
Yeah, I'll just chime in and say, since I've started here, the palette papers that Andy's using are probably one of the most essential tools that we use. I mean, every day.
Yes.
Every single day.
You just can't get away from needing some good place to put your paint. All right, so I'm going to set my 3/4 inch brush aside, and I'm going to shift to a good 1 inch brush that is dry. And I'm going to put some, trying to make sure we're still everything on camera. I'm going to put out some Prussian Blue. And Prussian Blue is a very, very intense blue color. And I am going to make a mixture of Prussian Blue, and just move part of it aside because you never know when you're going to need some again, and wipe your palette knife. When I'm creating a mixture of paint using my palette knife, I want to wipe my palette knife off every time I pick up paint because I don't want to contaminate any puddle of paint with a different color while I'm mixing. So I'm going to add a little bit of yellow light to my Prussian Blue. I want to keep this color blue and not green. So let's not add too much yellow to our blue, and then wipe your palette knife off. And I'm going to just take a little bit of white, and I'm going to check this color to see what it looks like. All right, so that looks like a nice color. Excuse me. I'm gonna cough for a moment. Okay, so it's a little bit of an aqua color, and that's going to be just what we're looking for. So I don't have to change this puddle of paint, but I am going to take some titanium white, and I'm going to add some of this color to it. So you all can start mixing this. It is Prussian Blue plus a little bit of yellow light, and then I've taken some of that color and I've added a bit of white to it. Right, I know that's a lot of mixing of color. If you wanted to, you could use just an aqua color of your choice. That's perfectly fine as well, but I tend to love to mix everything that I'm going to be using. I'm also one of those people that cooks from scratch most of the time. I know, crazy like that. But I'm from a good old Southern family, and you know, I was talking about spending time with my grandparents at their house on the lake, and I don't ever remember growing up that we ever went out to get like a fast food lunch or anything like that. It was always my grandmother cooking something. All right, so I'm going to pick up some of this aqua color that we made, and I'm going to begin to brush it right next to the pumpkin over here on the right-hand side. So right up next to my pumpkin. And it's not going to fill in solid, and that's perfectly fine. And then I'm going to brush it up kind of towards the little pumpkin stem where it curls around. And then I'm going to just flick this up, going across the grain of my plaque. And some of it's going to be a little bit more noticeable, and some of it's going to be less noticeable, and that's fine. And then here we go, coming across the bottom of the pumpkin and going up into the pumpkin a little bit. And then I'm going to come over here, and I'm just going to kind of stair step up into my pumpkin, and then come over here on the right-hand side. Make this a little bit more neat and tidy next to the pumpkin, and then just let this color trail off. The only time I'm super careful is when I'm right next to the pumpkin. But we're just getting some of this aqua color on our plaque. So slap it on, pick up paint as you need it, and let's go to town. Right now, we're only concerning ourselves with just getting some of this color on the background. We got more to do, but I just want you to get some of this color on and kind of start to hide the bottom of your pumpkin a little bit, just with some of these strokes of color that are going on. Like I said, we got more to do. All right, but I'll give you a minute to, I'll show you what this really looks like. It's not a full coverage of paint, but there is some on there. And then we're really going to start to have fun in just a minute. As though we haven't been having fun for the past 45 minutes. What I should have said is the fun is really going to kick into high gear in the next few minutes.
And Andy, just one more time, that blue color that you're using is Prussian blue mixed with a little bit of yellow light and an even smaller amount of titanium white, correct?
That's what I have right over here, yes.
And you're using a 1-inch brush right now?
Yes, I am.
Awesome.
Okay, I'm going to give you all just another minute to get this first initial splash of our aqua blue color on there. And then, like I said, we're going to kick the fun into high gear.
Oh, Andy, sorry, there's another question about the brushes. These are the FolkArt brushes, yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so what we're about to do is to move from mixing with our palette knife, because we know what that color looked like, and we are going to start mixing with our brush. So I'm going to take some of my darker blue. That's the original mix that I have a big puddle of. And then I'm going to pick up some titanium white, and I'm going to just brush mix that in. So what I'm ending up with is more paint on my brush and a slightly different color, because it's not the exact same color I just made, and that's okay. And I'm going to put a little bit more of this on. Because I've got more paint on my brush, I can fill in some more of those cracks a little bit. So you can do this right along with me. We're just brush mixing some of this color. Some of it may be a little bit lighter, some of it may be really close to the same color, and that's okay. Where I've got big gaps in my wood, I'm going across the grain so that I'm filling in a little bit more than I would if I were just pulling straight down. Does that make sense? Straight down, I end up with lots of little horizontal marks, but if I go across, I'm filling in and getting a little bit more solid coverage. And by a little bit more solid coverage, let me show you, there's still plenty of wood grain showing through. Plenty of texture, still a part of this. All right, so more of my blue color, more of my white. We're brush mixing and having so much fun doing that. So I'm going to start to step this up and just go across to fill in a little bit more on my aqua blue color. And I'm going to just mix a little bit more in and come down to the bottom edge of my plaque a little bit. Again, we have the luxury of knowing that this isn't anything. It's just color. It's just background interest and some more color. So we're not trying to paint anything specifically. I've added a little bit more white to my mixture. Not too much because we don't want to jump in value, but I did want this just to become a little bit lighter over here. And working it in kind of carefully tap, 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 pat, 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 scrub, scrub, scrub. Working this color in. And we're just having fun and enjoying it. This is playtime. It's me time. It's fun time. All right, so that's what mine looks like at this point. So I'll give you a minute or so to bring this up to bring your painting up to this level. And every time I would paint this design, it would come out differently. So you can't ever paint the same painting the same way twice. It just does not work that way. So every time it's going to be a little bit different. So just embrace that. And I can tell that this particular blue color, I have a little bit more yellow in it than I have in this one, and that's perfectly fine with me. I've got more red in this pumpkin than I have in this one, and that's fine with me. So I'm not precious about this sort of thing. Just kind of go with it and just make sure that it is has a pleasing look, because as you all know, a thing of beauty is a joy forever. All right, back to reality. So I'm picking up some of my blue and yellow mixture, and I'm going to add more titanium white to my brush as I mix it in this time. So we're going to lighten this color up. Mix, 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 mash, mash, mash. Making a lighter color. And over here, I'm going to start to tap this on. And work some of this into the wood grain a little bit. I'm going to do it again, more white. Tap this on. Work it into the wood grain. Tap, 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 and dab, dab, dab. Now, as I'm coming up next to the edge of my pumpkin here, I'm going to pay attention so that I don't mess up the shape of the pumpkin. I'm seeing some of you writing some very, very nice compliments, and I appreciate that. I wish I could sit down in the same room with you for about 8 hours and just teach you and paint and have fun together. That would be so great. But the Zoom platform right now is the best we can do, so we're making the most of it. I'm adding more white to this, and right over next to my pumpkin, I'm tapping this on, creating a little bit of a sharper edge there, and then we're tap, tap, tapping, dab, dab, dabbing, letting it float away, tickling those edges, creating a little bit of a lighter area over here. And again, this isn't anything, so it can't be any more than a little bit of a light area. So it's a light area of no distinct thing, and it's just in a shade of kind of aqua blue. And I'm dabbing a little bit of that on here, and I'll put a little bit over here, not coming up quite as high on my pumpkin there, but it just, and there's no rhyme or reason. This is just what I'm thinking my pumpkin needs. So there we've got some lighter color on there, and I'll give you a little bit of time to do that. And I'm sorry to say we're going to run over just a little bit today, but I can't, just can't get it all done in just about an hour. I probably need just about an hour and a half, sorry. All right, so I picked up a little bit more white on my brush, and I'm putting a little bit more of a brighter highlight over here. And I just want to make sure that it's indistinct. All right, that's what I got. So then you want to make sure that your blue is soft at the edges there. All right, so now we've got our orange and blue on our pumpkin plaque here. So we've got a great complementary color scheme going on. And I'm going to put out, oh, I thought I was going to put something else out on my palette, but I'm not. So we don't need anything else other than what we've got. No, I need some more white because I've used up all of my white that I put out. All right, we have a pumpkin stem to paint. So that's where we're going next. And I'm going to use a, this is about a number 12 flat brush. It's smaller. I'm sure it's not as small as some of you would like a brush to be, but I'm going to take some of my dark brown color and just a little bit of white, because I don't need my dark brown as dark as it is at the moment. And I'm going to, let's see if I can get this where you all can see. I'm basically going to begin to fill in the pumpkin stem. And by fill it in, I'm going to put some color on there, and it's not going to fill it in solid. Why? Because we have a very textured surface that we're working on, so we're not going to be able to fill it in, but I am putting some brown color on there, and then the stem curls all the way around. So maybe, I'm not sure whether the dark brown is a color you could see better or the dark brown that I put a little bit of white with, but I'm going to show you what this looks like up close. So that stem is nothing to fret about. Just a little bit of brown filling in the stem. So I'll give you a moment to work on that. So I'll give you about another minute to fill in your stem with brown. And it's fine if there is some of the plaque showing through. In fact, that'll be a lovely thing, in fact, to see. Seems like folks are having fun with this pumpkin today.
I think so.
It used to be that Halloween was the second most popular American holiday other than Christmas. So I'm assuming that that's probably still very much true. All right, we're going to move on to highlighting our pumpkin stem. So I'm going to take my brown color and I'm going to add a little titanium white to it. So I've made a light brown color. And I'm going to move this up so that you can see what I'm doing. Hopefully I'm away from your closed captioning if that's still on there. And I want you to watch very carefully. I'm going to be highlighting the stem by kind of dabbing and stabbing, Halloween appropriate language here, on the left side of the stem. That's our light side. And here's how I'm going to make the stem look crinkledy. And crinkledy is a very artistic term. So just dab a little bit on, kind of let it follow some of these curves a little bit. And over here, we're not going to carry that light color around the outside edge, but over here on the curve, I'm going to dab some of the highlights on the inside of the curve. Okay, so let me make sure that you all can see that. And it's hard to see because my palette sign, of course, got very light right in that area. Now that I've tapped a little bit more light on there, maybe you could see it a little better. Okay, let me show you that. Okay. All right, so I'm going to give you a moment to tap and dab some of those very light brown highlights on, and then we're going to dry our pumpkin stem and our pumpkin really, really well with our heat tool. Okay, so I'll give everybody just a moment to get your stem highlighted, and then I have the last fun thing that we're going to do today. So we're only over just a couple of minutes. I'm amazed that I'm not further behind than I am. All right, so we're dry here. And everybody, 1, 2, 3, eyes on me. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a Sharpie marker. So this is a regular Sharpie marker, and I am going to add the shading on my pumpkin stem. So pay attention. I'm going to come right along the dark side of my pumpkin stem, and because my plaque is very rough, I want you to look and see how that dark is not just one solid line, but it's a broken line. And then I'm adding some dabby dark at the tip of the stem. And some along the back side of our pumpkin stem. Letting that trail off. You see how that is? Oh, you wanted to know why a Sharpie and not black paint? Because this is so much easier and faster than doing it with a liner brush. All right, so here we go with some more fun stuff. So I'm going to begin to dot and dab some of my shading up into my pumpkin stem, and then some of it down into the pumpkin itself. And I'm going to carry some of that over here on the right-hand side of the pumpkin. And it's a broken line. It's not a solid line. Mercifully, our plaque is going to aid you in that. All right, so I'm going to put some dark down here at the bottom of the stem and let a little bit carry on to the pumpkin. Carry this shading around, and I'm just dotting and dabbing this on using the Sharpie marker as my dark shading color. I have to actually turn this and look at what I'm doing for just a minute. Just kind of sketch-a-do a little bit of this on. And then I promise I'm going to show it to you up close so you get a good detail of what he's been scribbling on here. But you got to make sure your pumpkin is very dry, or else you will gum up your Sharpie marker. All right, so there you go. Look at it super up close. All that dark is just scribbled on with the Sharpie marker. It's broken line. Really notice right along here how that line is a broken line. It's a few dots. It's not a solid line. Y'all have to relax with what you're doing. Just scribble and dot some of this on, and you'll love it so much more than if you were to try to paint some solid lines on here using a liner brush. Liner brush is just going to be more tedious than you need. So this is how we put that shading on our pumpkin stem, and it stays nice and raggedy. Okay, this is it. So once you're done, then you can sign your name, and then I would recommend varnishing this with a high gloss spray varnish on it, and you will have a great, I guess, I'm not sure that the Peanuts gang would appreciate that, but you will have a great pumpkin. All right, so I think that's going to bring us to a close. So I'm not sure, unless anybody else has a question here at the end, we can take that.
I did see one, actually. Somebody asked why would could you use like a denta pen, I think is what they said, instead of a Sharpie.
I just have a Sharpie is what I have. So
Okay.
that's what I used. But let me just show you one other thing that you could do if you were desperate to play a little bit more. I have some of that light aqua on the brush. So I'm smoothing in some right along this edge here, just to make sure that that edge of the pumpkin is disappearing a little bit. So you can see right along here, I just added a little bit of aqua just to make that edge soften a little bit more. Okay, folks, that is it for today's pumpkin. So thank you for joining us. Don't forget to post your painting to social media. If you post it in the Let's Paint with Plaid Facebook group, be sure to use the hashtag Let's Paint Challenge. You can also add the hashtag Plaid Crafts, Michael's Classes, and Make It with Michael's.
All right. Thanks for the class, Andy.
Okay, thank you for moderating, Stephen, and thank you, Yamena, for working the classroom from Michael's end. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you everyone for joining us today. See you next class.
Bye, guys.
Bye.